Okay, it looks like we're now broadcasting. So, hello, everybody. Good afternoon and good morning. Thanks very much for joining us from what looks like locations around the world. So that's pretty cool. Welcome to our webinar on e-commerce trend intelligence, where we will be focusing on building automated web scraping workflows. We are excited to bring such a timely and relevant topic to the forefront, and I'm personally excited for the insights our guests today will be sharing with each and every one of you. But before we begin, I've got a couple of typical housekeeping things to cover and a couple of just quick notes. So you'll see a Q&A function in your Zoom interface. Honestly, we encourage you to submit questions throughout our discussion. As things come up, please feel free to add your questions into the queue. We'll review as we go along. We are going to do our best to answer each of them in today's live session, but we will also be sure to answer any questions that we can't get to from the main session in one-on-one outreach and communications. Ultimately, our goal here is to make sure that each of you get as much value from today's webinar as possible. So please, as we go along, keep the questions coming. It really adds to the discussion. Okay. Well, that said, let me shift to introducing our main presenter for this trend intelligence webinar. I'm delighted to introduce Ander Rodriguez. Ander serves as CTO and co-founder here at Zenrows and has devoted more than a decade to advancing web scraping technologies. He is genuinely an expert in the web scraping space, and I'm thrilled for him to share some of those insights with all of you today. As mentioned, today we're going to be exploring how to build automated systems that can detect emerging e-commerce trends. Clearly, an especially important topic right now, as we're seeing shifting consumer behavior happening faster than ever. And ultimately, companies that can spot trends early are becoming the ones that are being able to capture more and more market share. Okay, so let's kick off with a quick look at today's agenda. Ander, can you please outline what our audience can expect us to cover?
Yeah, absolutely, Robert. First of all, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. Today, we'll focus on three critical areas that can transform how e-commerce businesses approach trend detection and market intelligence. First, we'll explore how to detect market opportunities early. This means identifying trending products before competitors do, and shifts in consumer sentiment before your competitors even know they exist. Then we'll dive into automating trend intelligence workflows. We'll show you how to build scalable data pipelines and create automated alert systems that work 24/7. And finally, we'll cover how to transform all this raw data into actual business decisions, converting trend signals into actionable insights that can drive your inventory, marketing, or product development strategies. These three areas work together to create a competitive advantage that compounds over time. The earlier you spot trends, the better positioned you'll be to capitalize on them.
Okay, so we've got quite a bit to cover today, so why don't we get started? But before we jump into sort of the meat and the solutions ultimately, why don't we talk about why this matters so much? Ander, what's ultimately the real cost of missing trends and not having true trend intelligence built for companies focused on e-commerce? I guess another way of asking is, what's the risk of falling behind in this intelligence race?
Statistics are pretty sobering here, Robert. Research shows that 90% of businesses report their industry has become more competitive in the last 3 years. And a huge part of staying competitive comes down to having real-time market intelligence and trend detection capabilities. Think about it. When you're late to market entry, competitors have already captured the first mover advantage. They've built brand awareness, secured supplier relationship, and established customer loyalty. Then there's inventory misalignment. Imagine investing heavily in a product category just as consumer interest is shifting away. You're stuck with inventory that's declining in value, while your competitor is already moving on to the next trend. Demand forecasting errors are another huge issue. We see this especially with seasonal trends or nowadays viral social media driven products. By the time traditional market research catches these shifts, the opportunity window has often closed. And perhaps most critically, there's what's called consumer preference blindness. That's when businesses fail to adapt to changing tastes and preferences, especially among younger demographics who drive a lot of purchasing decisions today.
So we've got late market entry, we have competitive pressures, supplier relationships at risk, inventory misalignment. I mean, it's a pretty broad set of risks. I think it would be helpful to maybe provide to just the general audience a few concrete examples so that we can put a few of those risks maybe into frame. Ander, can you give us a few examples of what this might look like in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at some high profile cases that really illustrate the points. Peloton's inventory crisis is a perfect example. During the pandemic, demand for home fitness equipment exploded, and Peloton ramped up the production to meet it. But as restrictions eased and people returned to gyms and outdoor activities, Peloton was slow to recognize the shift back. They ended up with warehouses full of unsold bikes and treadmills, which led to layoffs, executive turnover, and significant financial loss. This case perfectly shows how quickly companies needed to pivot during the pandemic era and what can happen if they don't. More recently, we've seen traditional retailers struggle to predict TikTok driven product virality. For example, when Stanley's Tumblr unexpectedly went viral on TikTok, traditional demand forecasting failed to keep up, and retailers quickly sold out nationwide. A product can go from unknown to selling millions of units in weeks, but only if you're monitoring the right signals and can move quickly enough to capitalize on that trend.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Peloton and the Stanley Tumbler examples are really interesting. And I think to me it's really impressive just how fast things are changing in e-commerce. The pressure that our audience and others must be facing just to keep up and find a competitive edge, so to speak, is pretty significant.
Yeah, what used to take months or years to develop now happens in weeks or even days. That's why automated trend intelligence has become so critical.
Okay, so let's think about that last point, the idea of automated trend intelligence that you just mentioned. How would this compare to what some and me also might call more traditional market research?
Yet more traditional market research has some fundamental limitations that make it poorly suited for today's fast-moving market environment. The traditional approach relies heavily on point-in-time snapshots, surveys, focus groups, one-time studies. By the time you've designed the study, collected the responses, analyzed the data, and made decisions, the market may have already moved on. And these methods also tend to work with small, often biased sample size, a focus group of 10, 12 people, or even a survey for a few hundreds or thousands doesn't give you the massive scale of real consumer behavior that's available online. They're also expensive and slow, as we've seen. It can take weeks or months to get results, and the cost per insight is quite high. Modern trend intelligence, in contrast, takes a completely different approach. Instead of asking people what they might do, we observe what they're actually doing in real time. Instead of small samples, we can analyze millions of data points. And instead of expensive studies, we can automate data collection and analysis. And most importantly, instead of backward-looking insights, we can build predictive models that help anticipate what's coming next.
Yeah, I mean, I have in a previous life I'd been on the other side of that sort of two pane glass in the market research focus group area, and I think it goes without saying, but it feels like there's really no other option right now but to go down the path of more automated intelligence. There's like genuinely, there's no trade-off between speed and more detailed real-time analysis for what's ultimately backward-looking insights. It's not possible. But I guess the question for you, Andrew, is how do we actually implement this? How do we take the next steps in this process?
Yeah, great question. First step is understanding where trends actually start and how they spread through the digital ecosystem. This isn't random. There's actually a pretty predictable pattern of how trends emerge and gain momentum.
So I guess the obvious question from me is to ask for an example. Do you have a can you give us a sense for what an example of that pattern might be?
Sure, think of it at three distinct stages that trends move through. The early stage is where trends are born, usually in niche communities. This is where the most forward-thinking consumers and trendsetters hang on. Now, the key here is understanding where your specific audience gathers. If you're targeting younger demographics, TikTok micro-influencers often showcase products before they go viral. Discord servers and specialized forums are where younger enthusiasts gather for incredibly detailed discussions about product features or quality and emerging brands.
So that makes perfect sense. But what if I'm asking for a friend here, but what if your audience skews a little bit older or a bit more experienced? Um, will you then want to focus on slightly different platforms in that scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. Some might work, but there are others. For example, Pinterest is a huge across age groups. People create mood boards and collections weeks or even months before trends actually hit mainstream. If you're seeing the same aesthetics or product type appearing across multiple of these Pinterest boards, that might be an early signal. For e-commerce specifically, Etsy, trending searches, and new product categories can reveal what consumers are actively seeking before it hits, again, major retailers. Also, Amazon's new releases section for some specific categories maybe show what's gaining early traction, or even Shopify's trending product dashboard can give you insights into what emerging brands are betting on. And Reddish niche communities for any industry around the world are gold mines for trend detection, regardless of your audience, age, industry. Subreddits like Bite for Life or Female Fashion Advice or some other more category specific communities often discuss products and brands long before they become popular. The growth stage, the second stage, is where trends gain momentum through, for example, influencer amplification. YouTube product reviews and unboxings are massive drivers here. When established reviewers start covering a product, it signals the trend is moving from niche to mainstream. Industry blogs and trade publications start picking up on the trend during this stage. You'll also see smaller e-commerce sites and emerging brands beginning to stock these products before the major retailers catch on. And again, as mentioned, this is nothing new. TikTok, again, plays a super relevant role. Viral challenges, trends, whatever that comes there and goes viral can accelerate this process dramatically. A product featured in a viral TikTok can go from growth states to mainstream adoption in days. And finally, the mainstream stage is where trends achieve massive adoption. Amazon bestseller lists is a clear indicator. When items climb these rankings, and it's clear they've captured broad consumer interest and are reaching mainstream adoption. Google search volume, when it spikes, that shows that general consumers are actively looking for this product. Also, traditional media coverage, or when major retailers start stocking products, that means those are the final signals that a trend has reached broad consumer adoption.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty obvious, but it seems like the ultimate goal here is to catch these trends as early as possible in this three-stage cycle that you've just outlined.
Yeah, exactly. The earlier you catch a trend, the more opportunity you have to capitalize on it.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So how do we actually build the system to monitor all of these different platforms and the stages that you've just mentioned? What's the process?
Yeah, the key is creating a comprehensive trend radar, let's call it, that covers all the major signal sources. We can break this down into three main categories that obviously will vary across industries and sectors: social media monitoring, e-commerce intelligence, and search and discussion tracking. I'll walk you through each of them. For social media monitoring, you're going to track, as mentioned, TikTok hashtags, performance, and engagement metrics, not just views, but saves, shares, and comment sentiment, the content itself. Then Pinterest pin saves or board additions are excellent early indicators too. And YouTube videos, if you combine the number of views with, again, comment sentiment analysis, that can show you what products people are actually excited about.
Yeah, and I mean this makes a ton of sense here, right? So we're not just counting likes, we're looking for like a next level. We're looking for emotional signals and ultimately early excitement in that process. That makes perfect sense to me. So you mentioned e-commerce intelligence earlier. How does this piece fit into the puzzle?
Yeah, when it comes to this part of e-commerce intelligence, it pays to watch more than one signal and source. For instance, a product starts climbing Amazon bestseller list quickly, could be an early sign of momentum. Meanwhile, new product launches on Shopify give a sense of where emerging brands or products are focusing their efforts. On Etsy, same trending categories and searches highlight what consumers are actively interested in. On Walmart's trending now section can offer a glimpse of what's starting to gain traction in Western markets. Together, these insights help you spot what's gaining traction before it hits mainstream.
So we're taking a different sort of angle from each of those platforms. That makes sense to me. I guess for the final piece, for the search and discussion tracking, how would you suggest the audience approach that phase?
Yeah, search and discussion tracking means keeping an eye on where conversations are heating up across different platforms. For example, Google Trends help you catch keyword spikes as search volume changes. Or again, as mentioned, Reddit, you can look at the engagement, things like ad vote comments, the quality of the discussion in relevant subreddits. X, formerly Twitter, is useful for tracking mention, volume, sentiment analysis, same thing, and also for some kind of products and industries. Quora can be a good option. Arising how often people ask about a topic is often a sign that interest is also picking up. Just wanted to mention that all the above examples are concrete cases for some industry. Your case might be completely different, but probably you get the idea and you can make this work to your use case.
Yeah, completely. And so I guess to recap on the previous bit, we're building a radar across social signals, so marketplace movements and search behavior, all of it working together to surface trends before they go mainstream. The next sort of logical step in this journey is how do we organize all of this data collection into a coherent system for actionable intelligence? How do we sort of take it to the next level?
Yeah, that's where the more technical part comes in. So bear with me. The architecture becomes crucial. You need a systematic approach that takes raw data and transforms it in different steps that we'll see into actionable intelligence. We think about this as four distinct layers that work together. The first data sources layer is your foundation. This includes social platform APIs and scrapping endpoints, the technical connections that let you pull data from TikTok, Reddit, Pinterest, and other platforms.
So this is ultimately where you're collecting those raw signals.
Yeah, the ones we mentioned a few minutes ago. You can also add e-commerce product catalogs, reviews. This will give you visibility into what's being sold, how it's performing, what customers are saying. Also, trendy and relevant, as we mentioned, search trend databases, Google Trends, for example, show you what people are actually actively and actually looking for. And then, depending on the case and the industry, again, more content feeds, some blogs, news outlets, or specialized reports help you understand the broader cultural context around those signals. Next layer, the processing layer. Second one is where your raw data becomes useful information. In the processing layer, the first step is data normalization and cleaning. This ensures that a mention of, say, PlayStation 5 and PS5 is treated as the same thing.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're starting to get into something pretty technically here. What in this instance, why is normalization so important?
Yeah, I know we're getting a bit technical, so bear with me again. Without this normalization, your analysis gets fragmented. If the same product is counted separately under different names, you lose accuracy. Clean, consistent data is the foundation for everything else. Without that, we cannot build on top of it. Once that's in place, we move to sentiment analysis, as mentioned a few times, and scoring. This helps you understand not just what people are talking about, but how they feel about it. A product with high mention volume but negative sentiment tells a very different story than one with positive feedback. Next, we can calculate the trend velocity to measure how quickly interest is growing. Is this a slow build or a sudden spike? And finally, we can use correlation analysis across platforms to track how these trends evolve. For instance, if something starts getting trendy on Reddit and then shows up on TikTok videos, that's a sign that the trend is gaining momentum again and probably moving into a new phase. Then the intelligence layer is where the real value starts to emerge. Intelligence. This is where we transform all the process data into meaningful insight, and it's honestly one of the hardest ones.
Okay, so sounds like we're coming toward the end. It sounds powerful, but it's also sounding a little bit abstract. What kind of insights are we talking about here?
Yeah, let me break it down. And again, this will depend on the industry and cases, but we can, for example, use pattern recognition algorithms to spot trends that resemble the trajectory of past successful models. These early signals usually mean that it might be about to take off. Then we can also apply predictive trend modeling, which uses machine learning to estimate which early stage trends are most likely to go mainstream. It's about forecasting, not about observing. We're gaining intelligence. We can also do anomaly detection systems that flag unusual spikes or changes in behavior. This can point to unexpected opportunities or early signs of disruption. And another valuable use case is competitive benchmarking. If you've gathered data on competitors in the earliest stages, first and second layers, let's say, you can use this information to assess how broader trends are affecting different players in the market. This can help you spot who's gaining ground, who might be losing relevance, and where there might be an opportunity to differentiate your brand or products. And finally, the action layer, the last one, fourth one, is where insights turn into business value. This is the part that enables action across the organization.
And once those insights are ready, how do we then start putting them to work more broadly?
It can start with automated alert system. This notify your team as soon as a relevant trend is detected. so you can respond quickly. Building on the data and intelligence mentioned above, dashboard visualizations provide real-time visibility into how trends are performing. Then they can make it easier to track developments without needing to analyze raw data manually. We could also integrate it with business tools, sending data to inventory management, marketing platforms, product planning tools, and then the trend data would be also flowing into those. And to round it up, you can also prepare some report generation and then distribute it to make the stakeholders receive the right information in the right format at the right time. It might be, say, a weekly summary or a decision-making report, so everyone can stay aligned.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I guess it would be helpful to put this into to find a way to apply this architecture in a real world business setting. Is there an example you can provide?
Yeah, let's go with a real world example. This is a simplified implementation that one of our retail clients built. And this is a great example because it solved a real problem they were facing and delivered in almost immediate results. They were manually researching trending products once a month, which meant that they were constantly behind the curve. By the time they identified a trend, competitors have already captured most of the early demand. So they built this a bit simple trend detection that now they're working to improve. So to simplify a bit, every morning at 6 a.m., the system automatically will monitor product rankings across 8 different e-commerce sites, tracking which products are climbing bestseller lists unusually fast. When it detects this rapid movement, like say a product jumping 40 positions in a category ranking in just 1 or 2 days, it immediately flags these products and calculates the market opportunity. For product categories where they set up some rules in advance, the system automatically adds the trending items to their procurement pipeline. This might sound a bit risky, but for more strategic decisions, it sends alerts to their buying team with ranking trends and flagged opportunities for manual human intervention. The system also tracks which early trend signals ultimately lead to sustained sales growth, gradually building a valuable database that distinguishes between worthwhile trends and passing fads. This kind of insight relies on accumulating historical data over time. The results have been impressive. In just 6 months, this system helped them identify profitable trend averages on an average of 3-4 weeks before major competitors even entered the market. They went from reactive monthly research to proactive daily trend intelligence.
Yeah, I really love this example. It's immediate, it's measurable, there's impact. But I guess the question for me is how complex was this for them to build?
I won't say this is an easy task. For a basic version, first version, you're comparing numbers and triggering some actions based on rules, super simplified. But for a more stable and long-term product, you'll need proper forecasting and spike detection, as mentioned above. And another super common pain point is reliably collecting the data across multiple sites, and that's where most teams run into challenges.
Yeah, and I mean this is close to home for us. And I would imagine there's some technical hurdles when you're trying to collect data from all of those disparate platforms you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Whether you're monitoring competitor prices or tracking product launches, detecting trending products, the technical challenges are kind of similar. First, anti-bot protections are everywhere these days. Websites use various methods to limit automated access. Things like requiring you to prove you're human with challenges or captchas, and restricting how often you can request data or temporarily blocking access if they detect unusual activity. This is completely normal nowadays, but it can interrupt your data collection completely. Second, most e-commerce sites, again, these days are dynamic. They use JavaScript for rendering, change layouts frequently, and introduce new features or changes all the time. This means a script that was working today might break tomorrow. For example, Amazon runs multivariate tests on product page layouts regularly. It's super common for them, as for all big players out there. Third, as you try to monitor more resources, the maintenance burden grows exponentially. More scripts means more things that can go wrong, and reliability often drops as you expand. You might start with monitoring 5 platforms and find it manageable. But when you scale to 20 plus sources, keeping everything running becomes a full-time job, plus server costs that also rise.
So I guess knowing these challenges, how can teams get the data they need, ultimately reliably, as you mentioned, but also at scale?
Yeah, good question. This is close to home, as you mentioned. So there are several approval strategies that overcome these obstacles. Web scraping APIs are really the great game changer here. These are managed services that can handle this anti-bot protection that we mentioned automatically. They usually eliminate the need to manage proxy infrastructure, browser fingerprint rotation, and all the technical complexity that usually turns trend monitoring into a full-time job. You get enterprise-grade infrastructure with guaranteed uptime and consistent data delivery without the maintenance overhead. For those who prefer to go to a lower level, let's say, they can go to proxy providers and build the extraction platform on top of those. They need to handle some of the above, such as, say, proxy rotation or session handlings. And also data sets can be an option if you don't mind the stale data. They won't work for the trend monitoring part per se, but this might come useful for training models on past data. And continuing with other issue types, there's advanced parsing. One of the common issues that happens is, as mentioned, the layout of the page changes, and that breaks your parsing. Some companies have teams just for these steps, just to check that everything works and everything is robust. So you can build, say, this is a bit technical, sorry, but you can have different CSS selectors and then XPaths and then pattern matching and then text recognition, different options. And so if each one of them fails, you can go to the next. And also, even then, set up a change detection to know when a site updates or no results are found. Also, continuing with that trend, count on errors. Things will fail and prepare for recovery. This is going through the internet, so some URLs will fail. The connection might fail. You can retry a few times, and even with different time periods without them, you can implement what's usually called the exponential backoff between retries. And having an automated fallback extraction method really comes handy, though it's not always possible, but when possible, we usually encourage people to try that as a plan B, let's say. And finally, above all the rest, data control quality is key. Validate your data in real time, catch anomalies quickly, reconcile the info from multiple sources, and if possible, build fallback methods for the critical data parts.
Yeah, I mean, super, super practical advice and solutions. Thank you, Ander. And I mean, clearly the web scraping API approach sounds particularly compelling for this use case and teams in particular that want to focus on building trend intelligence versus having to sort of manage their infrastructure.
Yeah, the goal is to spend your time on analysis and insights, not on keeping the scripts running.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so as we wrap up today's presentation, what are the key takeaways you want our audience to remember?
Yeah, there are 3 critical points that can transform how e-commerce businesses approach trend intelligence. First, timing is everything in e-commerce. Catching a trend early can mean 10x returns. Catching it late means you're left in the dust. Winning companies don't wait for gut feelings. They put systems in place to spot trends before they become obvious bets. Second, automation is no longer optional. The pace of change in consumer behavior, especially driven by social media, means that manual monitoring simply can't keep up. But the good news is that automation tools have become incredibly accessible. Third, that integration is where the real value lies. Collecting data is just the first step. The companies that dominate are those that connect trend intelligence directly to their businesses' operations, such as inventory management or marketing campaigns, product development decisions, etc.
Yeah, I mean, really terrific recommendations. Thank you, Ander. And I guess from my perspective, just having listened to this, the next steps seem relatively straightforward, right? We start by focusing on one high impact platform and set up simple workflows to monitor those trends. As you start to see results, you can expand and refine your approach from there. It's also important to choose the automation tools that fit your team's skills, right? And to prioritize those actionable insights over just the sheer volume of data, I would imagine.
Sure, sounds like a great starting point for the first steps.
Okay, so we have hit our Q&A session. We will, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to address as many questions as possible, and we've seen a bunch come in, so thank you. Those that we don't have time to cover today, as promised earlier, we will reach out, we will cover your questions. So please, if you have others, send them through. Don't worry about the time we have left. We will be sure we answer all of the questions that are sent in. This is our passion area, right? Like we love hearing from our customers, our prospects, and people aligned to our space around the opportunities they see with trend intelligence and honestly data collection more broadly. So please send them in. Um, all right, let's get started. What do you think, Ander?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to jump into specific scenarios and challenges from the audience.
All right, so I've got one here focused on sentiment analysis, which you mentioned a couple of times. So the question
Mhm.
is, what role does sentiment analysis play in identifying which trends are worth acting on?
Yeah, sentiment analysis is crucial in trend intelligence, but revealing not just what people are talking about, but how they feel about it. In the context of e-commerce, a product category or a product itself might see a spike in mentions, as we mentioned in, say, TikTok, Reddit, Amazon reviews, whatever. But without understanding the sentiment, it's impossible to know if that buzz is positive, negative, or neutral. For example, the automated workflow we've presented above, example, don't just track the volume of product mentions, but also analyze the tone of those conversations. If a new gadget is being discussed, for example, and everywhere, but most comments are complaints or negative reviews, it's a warning sign rather than an opportunity. On the other hand, a product with rapid growing, positive sentiment, that's a strong candidate for early action. If you incorporate this sentiment analysis into the trend detection system and the whole pipeline, the business can prioritize their efforts and resources on trends that are not just gaining traction in the sense of mentions, but also they're viewed positively by the customers. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, massive, massive. Okay, let me see. Bear with me. Um, One around website structures and anti-bot protection. So the question is, how do you handle changes in website structure, which you mentioned, or anti-bot protections when scraping data at scale?
Yeah, that should be a common one for us. I will split this in two. So for the changes, expect them and build flexibility around your process. I mean, I would love to have a different solution, but usually that's it. Set up monitoring so you're alerted when the data looks off or directly starts coming. And this way you can quickly review and update the structural logic. without losing time or insight. As mentioned, building a robust system with different ways to get the same data with CSS selectors, XPaths, if JSON, if it's embedded in the page, whatever you have, several options and check them. For extra precaution or sensitive cases, super relevant, critical business data, whatever, you can store the plain HTML from the site each time you go for a few days at least. In case the parsing fails, you can retry again later. If you store the HTML, the parsing fails, you fix it. That's great. You can rerun all the old HTMLs. Yes, they will be old, but at least you have the data back, because otherwise that data is lost. And if you're having historical data of prices, those are lost forever. There's no way to go back then. So for those cases, you can store. This comes with a storage overhead, obviously, but this may pay off for critical cases. And to answer the second part of the question, when it comes to anti-bot protections, focus on mimicking real user behavior in real browsers as much as possible. This is complicated, but again, and not much I can add. You can use techniques like rotating APIs, browsers, fingerprints, depending on how complex or how well protected the website is. And with that, you might be able to get it. We have many content pieces about this topic on our blog post for those interested. So that's a good starting point.
Love it. Okay, I think we've got time for we've got a bunch of these, so we've got time for one more, and then as I mentioned, we'll circle back. But um, okay, seasonality. That's interesting. So how can businesses use trend intelligence to anticipate seasonal demand shifts more accurately?
Yeah, I would say that first thing, and this used to work probably 20 years ago, but don't wait for last year's patterns to repeat. Things are changing super quick these days. Instead of instead of just repeating what you did last year or expecting the competitors to do it, pay attention to new triggers, new changes, new content, like a sudden, I know, a specific product variation, unexpected influencer campaign, anything that changes according to the trends we've been mentioning. Track how quickly this interest builds compared to previous seasons, for example, and you can fine-tune your inventory or even marketing actions in real time based on that. If you combine what you're seeing with your own sales data and internal data and external signals, etc., for example, changes in your inventory because you're selling more, for example, let's say, and at the same time, shifts in competitor promotions or trending topics or anything customer sentiment related, track all of those, combine them, internal and external. Obviously, how to do it and what data exactly to get the mix will depend on the data sources you have at the moment and your industry, obviously. So the first layer mentioned above, the raw data is super critical here. Depending on what industry you are and what targets you have, you can mix with your internal and try to build on top of that. And when you spot alignment between internal numbers and external buzz and everything, that's a super strong indicator. It's time to act.
I appreciate that. Okay, well, I'm super conscious of people's time. Appreciate that everyone has joined. We've got a bunch of questions that we need to get back on, and we will do so. But that's ultimately a wrap for today's webinar on e-commerce trend intelligence. Thank you again to our speaker Ander for his insights and expertise, and thanks very much to all of you for joining us today. We really appreciate the time and the questions, and hope to see you again soon for another Zenrows webinar. Keep an eye out for an email from us for the recording of today's session, a platform setup guide, and an ebook on e-commerce trend intelligence, just to sort of finish up the suite of information. But again, send us questions. You've got our direct emails here on the screen in front of you, and just a big thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Thanks, everyone. I look forward to seeing what trend intelligence systems you guys build. It's been a pleasure.